Hey YouTube, today I'm bringing you a Ghoti deck profile and test hands for the post-Alliance Insight format. In Alliance Insight we have 3 new TCG exclusive fish support cards which really help the archetype out. I've been playtesting this a lot and been finding that using this with cards like Necroface, we can make this deck really explosive, and it plays a bit like Tyr or Lightsworn, so if you enjoy that kind of gameplay but playing for the Banished Zone, then this deck's for you. We'll talk more about the individual cards as we go through the deck profile, but we'll jump right into it. We have, for the main deck, 3 copies of Necroface. So if you're not familiar with Necroface, what it does is that when it's banished, it banishes top 5 cards from both players' decks. And it's not a hard once per turn, so if you mill another one, then you mill another and banish 5 cards from both players' decks. This is really powerful, not only for banishing your own names, but you get to banish important one-ofs. Like in a Mitsurugi deck, you can banish the level 4 one that recurs from banish, and that's really good. Against Maliss, you can banish the traps, although it can sometimes backfire. But I'll explain how to handle that later in the video. And yeah, so it plays like Tyr, where like you're milling 5, a bit like Kelback or Agido, and then you make use of the banished names. And to pair alongside this, we have Aloof Lupine. Aloof Lupine is the best card to pair with Necroface because it reads that you can, when you normal summon it, you get to banish 1 card from your hand and then banish from your deck a card of the same type. So you banish the Necroface and then you banish another copy of itself, and that means that you're banishing 10 cards off top of both players' decks, and you might even mill the 3rd Necroface. And so banishing 15 cards from your opponent's deck really puts them in a tight spot, and it only benefits your deck because of the Ghoti recursion that's made possible with this card, and it helps that this card's at level 4 in terms of climbing into your synchros like Arion Boss. We have this tech card called Broomy. It never really sees play, but it reads that you can banish a card from your hand, or I mean you reveal 2 cards from your hand, you banish 1 and special summon the other, and it also helps it's a level 2 tuner. So with your level 4 non-tuners you can summon it and make a level 6 synchro, but its more important uses when paired with Necroface. You can banish the Necroface from your hand, and you can even banish fish from your hand if you reveal it with fish cards. So Aloof and Broomy both work with the Ghoti cards as well as Necroface, so there's many different combinations of cards that work well together here. Now for our fish engine, we have our 3 Snopios, our 3 Seeks, and 3 of the new card, Asphiscal. This card's really amazing. I've wanted to max this out in testing because when you banish it from your deck, you get to, or banish it in any way, but it's often going to be banished off Necroface mills. You get to summon it as level 4, and its other effect is that if it's normal summoned, you can special summon a fish from your hand. That's level 6 or lower, and then it's going to be banished when it leaves the field. So it's really the float effect that comes up really important in my testing. And you can even make things like Baguska if you pair it with an Aloof Lupine. So you banish and then you can make a Baguska with the Asphiscal and the Aloof Lupine. So these really important cards. We have Snopios that in these kind of ratios in this deck. This can be a turn 0 Raigeki because you can reveal it and banish 2 fish from your hand, including a Seeks or your Zep, which we're going to go into. And then you can synchro basically into a White Horror Whale or an Azcan turn 0, but it's only a 15% chance right now turn 0 that you can do that, but it's a pretty good chance of happening, and it's really important recursion engine in the deck in terms of recycling your fish and keeping them banished at all times. So it's a really impactful hand trap. Even if your board gets Raigeki'd, then this is your important like kind of play afterwards, where you play out the graveyard and hand using this. Then for our tuners, we have 2 paces, or 3 paces, because this is probably the most important level 2 tuner. It can combo with things like Snopios and Seeks, whereas the other of these tuners cannot, like Schiff and Keith. These are all important names to mill off your Necroface and banish. Then we have 2 Zep as well. Zep's a bit more important because of this turn 0 play you can do with Snopios. And Keith's important as a mill because it plays a bit like SP, where like if you're mass banishing cards, then you can summon any one of your banished fish, so it has a lot of utility in this deck. Shift's probably the least important, so you can think about mix up the ratios of these, maybe play 3 Keith and 1 Shift. But I wanted a variety of names so that you're always going to see something when you banish things, because we want to see all our names from our mills off Necroface. That is going to be it for the main engines, and then we have some consistency cards, which are going to be this card, which is going to be our mini Malian. What it does is that it can banish a card from your hand to summon itself, but it's more important for a reason I'll mention in a moment. So we have the 1 Shifter, of course. It's a Saki 1 of now, unfortunately, because of the ban list. Or, I mean, fortunately, I suppose in terms of gameplay, probably deserves to be at 0, because you can just steal games with it. Still, it's a 10% chance that we open it, because we're at 40 cards. And we have the new card, Fish and Bids. This is probably one of the most important pieces of support. How it reads is that you can banish any card from your hand, and that's really important how it's worded, because we can banish Necroface with this effect, which is really powerful and explosive, even if the opponent chooses to negate it, which they can do as part of the effect or ash it. And what happens is that the effect lets you banish 2 fish or send 2 fish from your deck to the graveyard, which is really powerful. But the opponent can choose to stop this by banishing 2 cards from their hand. But yeah, paired with Necroface is another way to banish Necroface from your hand, because it banishes any card from your hand. And it's important to know this starts at, you can only use it start at main phase 1. So you need to make sure you know how to play out your hand using it. And the reason that our mini Malian is so important is that it's going to be used with Small World. Now, actually, in testing, I think there's a better bridge than mini Malian, which is going to be Tenyi Spirit Shafana. And you can't use Fish and Bids with mini Malian as well, or Tenyi Spirit Shafana, because this fish locks you once it resolves, so keep that in mind. But yeah, Small World, it means that you can bridge into your Necroface, which is one of the most important cards of your deck, so, or your Blue-Eyes if you need it, using any of the fish cards and then your bridge as well. So I think Small World's definitely the type of, in this deck, is like definitely important, where you want to see specific cards that don't have any better searches. So, and we run so many copies of each name that we're not really troubled by like banishing anything. Then for our consistency, we have a Prosperity. You can think about changing this for something else, but it's another way of getting your Necroface and the Blue-Eyes, because you're looking for specific cards from your deck. We have 1 Gold Sarcophagus. This is, of course, really good for using on Necroface most of the time. And you can also banish your Seeks if you've gone through all your Necrofaces. We have Coolby and Talents. We're not really running hand traps, so I don't want to play a cross out, but these cards are really good. And we have 3 Full Loss. I do need to pick up my 3rd, but this is really good for in this deck in particular, because Ghoti plays really well into more Charmies already, and you can often clear your board. So after you resolve Deep Beyond as part of your board, the whole field's banished, and then you can just drop this from your hand. So it's one of the few decks that can actually play Full Loss when it goes first, and so Full Loss is really important for that. You can even normal summon it as a level 4 non-tuner to get to your Synchro Clams. So Full Loss is really important. You can even consider playing more Charmies in the main deck. Now for the extra deck, we have of course 1 Deep Beyond, our big boss monster, our 2 Azcan, our 1 White Aura Whale, our 2 Arion Pos, which is a really important starter. So these 3 are going to be our main interruptions on the opponent's turn. We have the new card, Toxic Boxfish, which is got some utility to it. So it normally is made with like a Zep, Paces, or any level 2 tuner, and your Keith. So it helps out in awkward hands where you just have Keith and a level 2 tuner. And it reads that when it's synchro summoned, it can banish a card from the grave, and I think that's the most important use for it, because it gets your fish with level 2 tuners into into the cycle again. So then you can climb into your Toxic Boxfish, into Arion Pos, into your level 8 synchros. Then we have our utility synchros. We have an Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon, a normal Stardust Dragon, because we're not really locking ourselves into anything except with Fish and Bids. where we knock into fish. So as follow-up or on your turn 1 plays, you can definitely make these 2 and climb into your level 10s. We have a Dragite because we have a lot of waters that we can put in the grave, so it becomes a spell trap card in the gate. We have a Disparter, which can climb into off the Excel Synchro Stars Dragon, or a Chenging, which is really nice because we can easily banish cards to trigger his effect. And for our utility cards, we have a Typhon, of course. We don't block ourselves at all, really, so this is a really good option. Baguska, which I mentioned before, made with Aspaskull and Lupine, is really powerful at stopping our opponent from playing. And an SP Little Knight, which is also got some utility use for banishing our fish from grave to get the cycling going around again. You can think about playing 2 SP if you have the space. That is going to be it for the extra deck. And for the side deck of choice right now, I like to play 3 Artifact Lancia still. You might be thinking like, oh, this deck's not very good because it loses Lancia like Maliss. And that might be true, but also this deck plays around Mulchamis really well and Roll. So you can't just think about one hand trap in the format. There's a lot of different complications with it. So it's a complicated game with hand traps. So even though it loses Lancia in this deck, we can definitely play around other hand traps. Then there's 3 Meows, which I think is really good in this format right now. If you were to Meows this deck, you probably do it in your own draw phase, but not many people know about it and how it operates. So they'll often Mulchama you on your turn, and that's actually incorrect because you only give them 1 or 2 draws. And and so I think this deck plays around Mulchamis really well. We have 3 Droll, really important against Mitsurugi. 3-dimensional Fisher for when we go first in certain niche matchups, and 1 Duster and 2 Bestials, of course, for Fiendsmith. Now that these are 1 each, I think they're really important to include in the deck, even inside. And that is going to be it for the deck profile. We're going to have a look at some test hands because I normally do combos, but there aren't any reset combos with this deck. It's going to be important to know how to play because it's very non-linear and depends on your mills how you play. Now we're going to do some test hands here because this deck, how it plays, that definitely depends on the kind of mills and the RNG you get off Necroface. And so for our first starting hand, we have a Call by the Grave, a Gold Sarcophagus, Aspaskull, Broomy, and Fuelos. It's a really good hand for showcasing how we kind of sequence this deck. So here, what I'd like to start with. So first of all, you can put the non-engine kind of away, and we're kind of like dealing with these 3 cards for the most part. We could use Fuelos as a normal summon, or reveal a Broomy, for example. So it definitely has utility, but for now we'll play with these 3 cards. And Callback can be used for any hand traps. So we're going to start with our Gold Sarcophagus. This will of course banish our Necroface. And the Necroface will trigger to banish us 5 cards from both players' decks. Face down. Give a quick shuffle. And so off our Necroface mills we have a Zep, Paces, which is really good. Another Paces, not so good. Seeks, which is really good. You really want to mill this guy, and Lupine. So here we're going to have some triggers. We do want to go into Aspaskull early in case we manage to banish Seeks, because we always want a fish in hand in case we banish Seeks, because we can use Seeks effect here. And we'll look at the rest of these later. And we'll go ahead and summon him by banishing a fish from our hand or graveyard. So we'll banish Aspaskull and summon the Seeks. Seeks will then add a fish from deck to hand, and then we can banish a fish. So we definitely want to do our mills first and then think about what we want to banish, because the mills are random, but our banish is our choice. So we'll go ahead and banish our Keef. So add a Keef from deck to hand, and then banish it. Now we'll come back on our next standby phase. From here you can think about just going for a normal summon of Broomy. and we'll save the full loss for our next turn. So we can then synchro these two off into an Excel synchro you can think about, or keep in mind that Broomy actually has a restriction which can't be used for anything that's level 8 or higher as synchro material. So what you can think about instead is going for a Dragite, and then it's placed under Nibiru, and it's going to be a spell trap card negate. So it doesn't look like much, but we're going to set our card, and on the next standby phase we're going to get 2 floats. So we're going to get Keith and we're going to get our Paces. From here we have a few layers of interaction. So we're going to get our spell trap card negate with Dragite. When our opponent special summons any monster, we can banish our Keith and target to special summon something like our Zep. And after that we can think about using Zep on summon or Paces at any time to then go ahead and synchro summon. So we'll use the Zep there and the Dragites, synchro these two into our Deep Beyond. We can think about using Call Bite earlier in the turn, but then we banish the field, and then we have nothing left. But as our last interaction, we can then full loss after all this. So full loss is really impactful here once we resolve this hand. And then our next follow-up turn, so for our next standby phase, we're going to have Deep Beyond and Paces as well as Keith that come back. So the recursion here is crazy in this deck, and it's a lot of fun to use for that reason. And then during our main phase, we can think about using this Seeks here in the grave, and to use it, we can make use of Deep Beyond being a synchro monster. So we can send our Paces, our Deep Beyond, into an SP Blissful Night, and SP can then banish our Seeks from the grave. And then it will summon itself by banishing our Paces, and then it can add a fish, banish other fish. So you can see how this kind of like turbos out of control once it gets going, and it's a lot of fun to play and see what you mill, and kind of operating on the fly of like how you play. So we're gonna move on to another test hand now. Alright, for our next test hand, we're going to see what we get. We're going to start with a full loss again, a Broomy again, and Fish and Bids, Gold Sarcophagus, and Aloof Lupine. So some of these cards are the same as before. If we were going second, we have a full loss, which is really important, but we'll put it aside for now and think about these cards here. So it's a bit unfortunate that we have kind of 3 cards here that kind of really want to work together with Necroface, but no Necroface access as of yet. And so at the start of our main phase, we of course had to use Fish and Bids. We think about which one of these we want to get rid of, and here it'll probably be Aloof because it really works well with Necroface, but we don't have Necroface access. And now our opponent has the choice of banishing 2 cards or negating with Ash Blossom. So in this test hand, for example, we'll think about they banish 2 cards from their own hand, and you know, a lot of the time that will happen, and so we need to think about how we play from here. So we'll go ahead and use our Gold Sarcophagus. We do not have a fish, so we don't want to banish Seeks here. Instead we're going to go ahead and banish our Necroface and see what this gets us. So banish Necroface, of course, means that we can banish the top 5 cards. I'll have a quick shuffle and we'll see what we get. So first card, Paces is good, Shift is good, another Necroface is great, Aloof, and Zep. So that's me out first Necroface. Of course, we hit another one, so it's a really good hit, and we get to banish another 5 cards. Small World, Seeks, Zep, Aspiscool, and a full loss. So unfortunately we don't have a fish here that we can use to summon our Seeks, but we managed our Aspiscool, which is really good. We can go ahead and summon that straight away, and the rest of these cards are banished. And it looks like we don't have much to do here, but we do still have a normal summon for Broomy. I promise you don't always just normal summon it. It's going to be really important when you pair up things like Necroface and your Ghoti names if you draw them in hand. But we can normal summon that and then go ahead and climb. We'll try something different here. We'll go into our ALIN boss, and that will banish any fish that we're missing from our deck. So looking at the things we banish, we have a Shift and a Paces. So we really want to get to Keith because we don't have Keith. And because we have Fish and Grave, we can actually go ahead and banish our Seeks, and Seeks can banish Aspeskull to summon itself out, and that helps us with bodies. So Seeks will then be able to add our Keith from deck to hand and then banish the Keith. And just like that, we have pretty much our full board, because in the standby phase, we're going to have 3 other fish come back, which is going to be Keith, our Shift, and our Paces. And really, we can play this out however we like. So you can think about, as a priority, kind of like synchro off ALIN boss during their main phase, because once we make something like a White Aura Whale to destroy their attack position monsters, then we can go ahead and banish ALIN boss by its effect to add our Snopios from deck to hand. From here, what we can do is, if our opponent special summons, we can banish this for anything from our banish. So we can think about summoning back something like our Zep, and then synchro off using Zep, or at a later point, which we could do here. So that's another point of interaction. We have our Shift, which can go ahead and synchro off into a Deep Beyond play, for example here, because Deep Beyond doesn't require only one tuner. And that will banish the board. And of course, just like before, we have cleared our board, which means we can use our Fool Loss here against the opponent. And we still have our Snopios in hand, which represents another interaction. We made sure to put a Zep in grave, or make sure there's one in deck when we have Seeks in our grave, but we can go ahead and keep our fish in the cycle again, come back next turn, use Snopios, banishing our Zep, or we can think about banishing our Zep here, and our Paces, and we get another point of interaction because our Zep will come back by its own effect when it's banished, and Snopios can target itself with its own effect, so it comes back to hand afterwards, and Snopios will be banished by its own effect. Zep will synchro, and we can make our last fish synchro, which will be our Azcan, to banish another opponent's card and itself, and then Azcan can come back by banishing a fish from grave, which keeps our Shift coming back next turn. So banish that, and we get our Azcan back. We keep them under Fool Loss, so it's really hard to play for them. And then in our next standby phase, we have a lot of recursion again. Our Shift will come back. Oh, Snopios comes back to hand because we can banish a fish from grave to add it back to hand, like our Seeks, and then Seeks come back by banishing this. So there's a lot going on, but in the standby phase, we have everything that comes back again. As long as everything resolves, this is our board on our follow-up. So there's a lot of follow-up going on here. We can think about synchro climbing to Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon into a Changing, for example, here, and that will really help us break the opponent's board. You can get us here. Send back the Shift and try to play around the Nibiru as much as you can, but just to show off, you can make Changing, and a good way to trigger Changing is to banish Shift from grave, give this 500 attack, trigger Changing to banish from the opponent's field and grave. And that's going to be pretty much it for the deck profile. I hope you enjoyed. So yeah, it really depends on like what kind of mills you get as to how you play this deck. But it is a lot of fun, just like Light Swan or Tyr. If you're a fan of those decks, I'm sure you'll enjoy this too. And it's something fun to bring to locals. I'd even like try to resolve Necroface against things like Maliss, because there are a lot of one-offs in the deck, even though it doesn't sound very good. On your turn 1, you can make something like Ascan to try and clear their body. It's already from banished before. You can banish their TB11 or MTP, and then it's pretty good because they have a hard time recurring the traps if they're banished. So yeah, in my experience, it doesn't have like a horrible matchup against Maliss as you might think by Necroface, because of these kind of like these limited resources in modern decks. But yeah, hope you enjoy and catch you later.